So in the last lesson, we went over how we can create functions, and it completely went over my head that we can also create functions without arguments, such as say hello, and we don't have to add any text inside there, but usually that just helps us to be a bit more specific with our function. But if we don't provide anything there, we can just type in hello there, and you can also add whatever kind of code you want inside here. It can also be print goodbye, and then we can just go down and call it the same way as we did before, as many times as we want. And when we print it, you're going to notice that we executed this block of code 3 times. So all I wanted to say is that it's not necessary to actually add an argument here, but in this video we're going to be going over what happens when we do add the argument and how we can use it to make our code a bit more precise. So anyway, let's get started with creating a function which is going to be called createUser. We're going to pretend we have a user database, and here what we want to define first is the username, followed by the age and the amount of money the user has. So the first thing I want to mention is that to add an argument, all you have to do is type it inside the parentheses and separate them by commas. You can add as many arguments as you want. You can even say height and width and so on. You can add as many as are necessary. These will be used as variables later when we actually call the function. And another thing to note is that you can provide default values to these, because if we define them here without providing any default values, that means when we call the function, we are going to be forced to actually provide something. But let's pretend we don't have information. For the money, for example, we can provide a default value of 0, and also for the age we will provide a default value of 0. So now the only parameter we need to define when we create this function is username, and these will default to 0 if we do not provide them. And one more thing, it's important that the ones with default values such as 0 or 10 are placed at the end. You cannot type it in the middle of a function like this and then continue it with the end, because you're going to get this error that says non-default parameter follows default parameter. To make this work, we would have to take the age and place it behind the money. But we will go back to what we had earlier, where they have 0 as an age and 0 for the money. And all this function is going to do is print all the information that we've gathered, such as the username, the age, and the money. So now we can go down here and create the user. And the first one's going to be Mario_123. And because we provided these default parameters, you're going to notice that if we hover inside these parentheses and do Command or Control+P, it's going to provide us what we have to insert. And since these are default, it's going to tell us we do not have to insert them because there is the 0 there and there's a 0 there. So it's the equivalent of doing this essentially. But if we run the program, it's going to print the user, which is Mario_123, with age of 0 and money of 0. Again, if we remove these, we're not going to be able to use this function because it's going to throw an error that we're missing 2 of the positional arguments, which is age and money. And these are required because we have not defined them anywhere. So let's go ahead and provide the 0 again and create another user. This one's going to be Luigi_123. And we're going to provide 30 for the age and 3000 for the money. Now if we run the program, it's going to say user Luigi, age 30, and the money is set at 3000. Now let's pretend we know how much money he has, but we don't know the age. The problem is we can't just type in 3000 for the money, because now this is going to be considered the age. As you can see, if we go over here, it's going to tell us which parameter we're currently on, and this is the age. So of course, Luigi is not 3000 years old. But to refer to the money, we would just go ahead and type in money or whatever parameter you've defined over there, and you would insert the money here. So as you can see, we successfully inserted 3000 into the money while age is still set to 0. And in theory, you can even type in the username like this, and it's going to function exactly the same way. It's not recommended because this is a required parameter, and it's hard to tell that it's that if we actually define it like this. So it's a lot easier to leave this at the beginning where it's required, but this is also acceptable because we tell the program that here's the username, and this will refer to this immediately. So if you actually type in the variable here with an equal sign, you'll be able to put these in any order you want. But in general, it's much easier just to do it like this, because this one is required, and we can tell it's required because we didn't use this syntax. Now we're going to go over one more important argument feature, and to do this, we're going to create a function that's called add numbers. And earlier you noticed that we did A, B, and C, but this only allows us to add 3 numbers, and sometimes we want to add 1,000 numbers or we want to add 5 numbers. So why limit it to only 3 numbers? And we can do that by providing an asterisk followed by a variable name, such as numbers. And by doing this, we tell the program that we're going to insert any amount of numbers we want, and you're going to store that in a list. So inside here, we can now go ahead and type in total equals 0, and for number in the list of numbers, we're going to add it to the total. So plus equals number, because this is going to create a list for us depending on how many numbers we insert. This is going to go through each number in the list, and each number is going to be added to this total over here. Then outside of this for loop, we can go ahead and print total of numbers is total. Now all that is left for us to do is to call this function. So add number 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 6, 6, 8, 8, 8, and then minus 22. We can add all of these numbers, and when we run the program, it's going to tell us the total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 366, 888, and minus 22 is 1,242. And we can actually just remove these, and you're going to notice that we'll get a nice calculation of these 4 numbers, and we can do it with as many or as little numbers as we want. And of course, we can use this function several times, so we can add a 3 here and a 2 here, and the second calculation will give us this. So that's just a very good thing to know about functions, is that with the asterisks, you can create variables that take any amount of arguments, but you can only use one of these in the parentheses. And if you decide to add more parameters, you're going to have to go ahead and do this. So we're going to type in value, for example. And as you know, there's no way to reach value because we're just going to keep on adding numbers, right? So the only way to get around that is to explicitly write value and add the number. Because now if we go over this, you'll notice that we exited out of the numbers and we made it to the value. Otherwise, there's another way around this, and that is to take the value and place it at the beginning and leave the numbers for the end. So now it's going to work in the normal order, which means the first argument is going to be the value. So this is the value, and if we do Control plus P, you're going to notice we are on the value. If we tap on the 2 and do Control plus P, we will enter the number argument. Anyway, that's actually all I wanted to show you in this lesson. That should just about cover everything you need to know about creating functions. And in the next lesson, we're going to go over recursion, something very special that you can do with functions.